Okay, now I'm going to give a quick example of a loop, of a do until loop to find the first blank cell in a row. So we can write some code here like sub do until blank cell. And all we want to do is, like before, dim x row as long and dim x call. I don't even know if we'll need x call as long. Oops, I shouldn't have put the dim there, sorry. And I want to set x row is equal to 1 and x call equal to 1. And now I want to do a do until loop. Do until cells x row x call dot value is equal to blank. So it's very common when you're coding that you want to find the end of a range. And initially we'll do this with loops. There are other ways to do this, but it's good to know how to do it like this. So let's say you want to find this cell. Let's say you have some data. Well, let me just clear all this out. And let's say I'll just put some numbers here. Rand. I'll put the rand function. Give us some random numbers. And let's say I have this range of data, just random numbers. And I want to find the end of the range. I want to find the last row in this column, or I want to find the last column in this row. How can I do that? So to do that is real easy with a loop. You just start somewhere, and in our case we're going to start in row 1, column 1. And all I'm going to do, if I want to find the last row, x row is equal to x row plus 1, I'm going to loop over these over the rows, and I can select I can do something like this to show you what's happening. So what's happening here, let me just minimize this range for a second. What's happening here is that I'm setting two variables, a row variable and a column variable, equal to 1. So I'm going to start in cell 1, 1, or right here, A1. And then I'm going to loop until the value in this row is equal to blank. And once it is, I'm going to stop. So let's see what's happening here. I select whatever cell I started in, cell 1, 1, right? There I selected it. Now I just increment it. I increment the row variable, I mean. And now I go back to the top of the loop, and I check, is the value in the next cell greater than, or is it blank? And it's not. So now I select the next cell. What I'm doing here is checking if this value is blank. If it's not, I'm going to select the next cell. So there you go. I do it again. And now notice x row is equal to 3 and x col is equal to 1. So what it did is evaluated row 3, column 1. Here's row 3, column 1. And it said, is it blank? And it's not blank, so it's going to execute the code. And so it selected row 3, column 1 right there with this line. That line of code selected row 3, column 1. Now I'm going to increase x row by 1. And there it went from 3 to 4. And now I go back to the top of the loop and I evaluate this condition, which is now going to say, is cell x row 4, row 4, column 1, is that blank? Well, look at row 4, column 1, it is blank. So now when I do this, it jumps out of the loop, and I found the last, I'm in the cell of the last row. So now you can find the last cell of your range. But if you wanted to find the last row for some reason, let's put a variable here called last row. Last row is long. And all I'm going to do down here, once you jump outside this loop, I know that the last row is going to be equal to x row minus 1. So if I just put a breakpoint there and I run this, the last row should be 3, right? If I step through this line, look at last row is 3. So that's how you would find, and let me just keep that there. That's how you would find the last row of a bunch of data that you want to loop through. Because sometimes you'll get data and it'll have 3 rows. Then sometimes it'll have 14 rows. Well, what if you need to know that? What if you need to know how big your data is? Does it have 14 rows or 3 rows? Well, now you know how to do that, because if I run this again, last row has the value 14 in it, which is the last row of the data. And one thing to note is that you don't need to select a cell here. So I could comment this out, and if I run it again, I get 14 again, because it still loops through this. Even though you might think you need to select it to get the row, to increase the row or anything, you don't need to select it. The loop is checking the x row and the x column without you even having to write that you're selecting it. So you don't need to write this select. In fact, it's faster not to write this. So commenting this out made the code faster, because now I don't have to go an extra step and select a cell. In the same way, you can look at the column. So you can have a variable here called last call, and instead of doing it like this, x row is equal to x row plus 1, you can do x call is equal to x call plus 1, and then just exchange these things. Last row, instead of doing last row, I'll do last call. And now I'm going to find the last column. So I should find, this should be 6, because there's 1 column, 2 column, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I should find that last call is going to be equal to 6. So if I put my cursor below here and run it, last call is indeed 6. And if I extend this out a couple more columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now I have 10 columns. If I run it again, now I get my last call is equal to 10. So this is a great way to find out, how big is your data set that you're going to have to manipulate. Sometimes you're going to have to maybe copy these columns and copy this the first 2 columns or something like this. This allows you, using loops, you can find the last cell of the last row of your data. You can find the last column of your data, and we'll see things what we can do with that later on. But just know now, now you can maneuver around worksheets a lot better with these loops. Okay, that's it for this video.